On this episode of Behind the Screens, we're going to talk about one of the most important parts of tabletop role-playing games, player agency. Finny and I are going to give you some tips, tell you some pitfalls to watch out for, and help you to be a better GM at your table. Stick around. This is Masters of Pen and Paper.
Finny and DG lead the way. New RPG systems every day. Dice roll quick adventure calls. Walking through tabletop's golden halls. Masters of pen and paper. RPGs of every flavor. Talking about different creators. The choice of games is never greater. Come with us to games they run through. New, old, and interesting. Thank you all for listening.
Masters of Pen and Paper, welcome in. This is episode 20, Behind the Screens, our little chit-chat session here with my main man, DG.
And you're Finny.
And I am Finny. I am.
That was the reverse. That was the player agency side of things.
Yeah.
That was the test.
Exactly.
And we passed.
And we both failed it. Oh, wait. We passed it.
It depends how you look at it, I guess. Episode 20, the Behind the Screens episodes are opportunities to take a little bit of a break from hammering new game systems into your ears.
As much as we do enjoy that.
And
we need a little break every now and then.
And it gives us an opportunity to just talk about playing the game from the point of view of either the player or the GM, although this one's a little bit more focused on the GM side of the house because we're talking about making your game a fun one, basically.
About including your players in your world and allowing them to make choices and feel like those choices are, sort of shaping their world, your world.
Making the choices matter.
Yeah.
We're not here. You're going to hear this often, but I mean, your players aren't there to sit in the audience while you read them your novel. That's not
whole
what you do.
Other thing. That's a completely other thing.
Something else.
That is
if you want to write a book,
gaming.
You go write a book. There's nothing wrong with writing a book. I think that's a fantastic idea, but that's not how you play TTRPGs, and that's basically what we're getting at.
Yeah.
So, Finny, let me ask you this, because I think this is what probably the people who are listening to the episode are going to be thinking. Why are we talking about this?
Well, so TTRPG stands for Tabletop Role-Playing Game. So the player takes on a role, and they decide how that role is to be played out.
I thought you were going to say the player takes on a role and they play a game. Therefore,
well, yes, but no, they step into the shoes of this character.
Yeah, and I mean, TTRPGs aren't like other games, right? Like when you think about RPGs in as far as it goes to like a video game or a board game, there's strict rules and boxes that your character needs to fit into. Whereas with TTRPG, we're encouraging blowing the lid off this thing.
Yeah, thinking outside the box. And it's very, how do I say it? It's like if a player has an idea, the GM should, I feel, entertain that idea to a certain point and be open to maybe fudging things in their story to make that idea kind of work, or some variation of it.
Yeah.
That's the whole creativity of playing this, taking on that role of this character.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes people forget that this being a game is a game for everybody involved. This isn't players versus GM. You're all working together to build the story, to insert whatever here that you're trying to do at your table. And that's really hard to do when one side or the other holds all the power. It is a balancing game. The GM can't run everything. The players can't run everything. It's kind of a little bit of in between.
That is not to say that the GM should not have an overarching plot.
That's correct.
To tell
Herd
the story.
The
if we are plopped into the middle of Gargamesh and here you go, guys, have fun. Well,
what do you want to do?
I don't know. What can we do? Well,
What do you,
Exactly.
I don't know. You can do anything.
Yeah.
And then you play this run around in a circle game.
Exactly.
Of how that is.
And then the party falls apart real quick, and then the game's over, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
So
we're not saying blow the lid off, go full blown scale open world, but we are saying don't tell the players that this is the road you're going to walk down, unless that's specific to something to do with this area. There's these asterisks that kind of play into this, where sometimes it's important to make sure that the players go down a specific path. And we're gonna get into railroading shortly here. But
I was gonna say there better not be any choo-choos in the thing.
Sometimes you have to do it as a DM, but it's important to identify the difference between player agency and limiting choice. These are not the same thing. Limiting your choices is a good thing. Taking away your player's agency is not a good thing.
There are certain ways to do railroading that are very doable and unnoticeable.
And continue to have the players engaged with the game.
Yes, exactly. Because running the game is hard, but trying to steer your players in a direction that you want your story to unfold is even harder. This is like 100%. This is the hardest job that the GM has. Now, this is, of course, system agnostic. We are not bashing
this isn't particular
on,
to anything.
D&D
We've gone through
DMs.
over 15 games in this podcast alone. This advice pertains to all of them, even the little
Every
one-pagers.
single one. Yeah. Everyone.
All of them.
Everyone that is a GM and a player. Even if it's just one-on-one.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
otherwise, it's not a TTRPG.
Yeah, I mean, we got the solos in there too.
You still have a GM and a player in the solos. Just you play both the roles. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, like the thing is, and like you said, this is kind of the hardest part of the game, and it comes to you with time and practice. So that's going to be a thing. But we're going to try and give you some tips and help you along the way, right? Because the player spends a lot of time creating their character. Right? They create the character, they create the personality, they give it a background, they imagine this character in whatever world it is that you're creating. And so they also determine at the time of creating this character how that character is going to act and think and speak and what their mannerisms are going to be and all these other things. And every time as a DM you say, this is what your character does, and they disagree, you're failing as a GM. So it's important to make sure that we're all on the same page, that the player agency is not the same as limiting player choice. If I say you can do A, B, C, that's not railroading you. That's saying these are the options. Like,
yes, these are the options that you have.
There might be an option D that we haven't thought about, but do be aware. I probably don't have something prepared for that. And it's probably going to be really difficult because these are what you need to do.
Because A, B, and C are what I have prepared.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Now, that's not to say that, like you say, there isn't a D or E or F or G or all the way down to Z.
There's limitless options.
But it's going to take a lot of work on everyone's part.
That's right. Yeah.
To do those extra ones.
Exactly.
And lots of tables are not going to be working with that very well. Because that does take a lot of experience to ad-lib all of that stuff.
So just before we get into too much deeper here, we'll give you the disclaimer, right? Because I know as a listener, you're probably thinking, like, who are these guys, like, to tell me about how to be a GM, right? So we both have over 20 years experience playing the game. And I mean, we'll be the first ones to tell you, we're not the best of the best. Even though the title of the podcast is Masters of Pen and Paper, there is always room to grow.
We are not masters. That was a
tongue-in-cheek title.
We are very far from, but or experts even.
Yeah,
but.
and I mean, we're always learning. We're always growing. We're working together to try and make the best game we can.
That's right. We want to help others kind of especially you budding GMs and trying to get their games going, and how, like, where do you start? Because GMing's daunting.
That's right.
Very daunting.
Even some of the veteran GMs, I know oftentimes I need this type of advice as well for somebody who has GM'd a fair amount. I do need reminders every now and then, like, hey, pump the brakes. Like, you're not Matt Mercer. Pull it back. We're playing a game here. You're not putting on a show, right?
We're having fun.
And so the behind the scenes episodes we mentioned earlier, but basically we kind of go over the nuts and bolts of how to run the game and to play in one. And so this is kind of add on to our standard show, which is going through the rule sets and stuff. And we mentioned earlier, this is platform agnostic. Just because you play D&D or Pathfinder or Merkborg or whatever it is that you are currently running, this advice should be beneficial to you in one way, shape, or form.
We hope.
With that being said, Finn, I think we should start with defining what player agency even is.
That's great. Player agency is defined as the ability for players to make meaningful choices that affect the story and the game world, where meaningful means how the world or object reacts to and ensuring decisions have real consequences.
That's right.
Now, that's a big one.
It's a mouthful.
Have consequences.
Yeah.
It is, because
it's what it comes down to. And consequences doesn't mean bad. Consequences just is the reaction to
it is
to
what
the action.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
The PCs belong to the players. They are the player characters.
That's right.
They are not the NPCs, the non-player
That's right.
characters.
It's kind of in the titles.
Yes.
If you're ever confused, just check the definitions.
Just check the definition. The NPC is the non-player character,
so the
played
player,
by the GM.
Player doesn't play those ones.
Does not play those. The player character is the characters that the players play.
The player does play those ones.
That's right.
Nailed it.
Yep. 100%. You
I win.
Test is, that's beautiful. Perfect. Yeah, and they have the freedom to act on the problems that are placed in front of them. And this is where the role playing comes into play. Mm-hmm. We're going to say play a lot.
It's going to get a lot. Also, I'm going to switch between DM and GM because it's pre-programmed in my brain that DM is the default. But essentially what that means is that as the GM, I say to you, you come down a hallway and the large boulder is blocking the path. What do you do? I don't say to you, you come down the hallway and a large boulder is blocking the path. So you should take out your dynamite and blow it up.
No, I'm going to be super strong and try and roll it out of the way, man.
Right. So, I mean, like, that's kind of like the example. Like, me as the DM describing the scene and telling you what to do is taking your agency away. Your agency being your freedom to choose. Because you might come down this hallway with the boulder blocking the path and be like, oh, this path's blocked. Let's go back and find a new path. Yeah. Oh, this path's blocked. Let's pull out our climbing gear and climb over top of it. Oh, this path's blocked. Let's pull out our pickaxe and tools and mine straight through it.
Heck yeah.
Insert multiple ways of solving the problem here. That's what the players do.
And that's what the GM should do, is present problems for the players to overcome.
Yes.
This is how we save player agency, by letting the players overcome the obstacle themselves.
Absolutely.
Now, the GM can give them hints, all sorts of things. When it comes to actions and feelings of the player characters, that is the player's realm of play.
Absolutely. And it's on the GM's style as well, right? Some GMs, they don't want to help you at all. Some GMs, they want to help you a whole bunch. These are things that you're going to learn. See our previous episode about session 0. These are things you're going to learn at your session 0 of how that GM plays, how the table is, how the players around the table want the game to be played.
Every table is different.
Every table's different. And even the same table with a different GM is also different.
Yes. It is wild.
Yes.
It's so cool. That's what I love about TTRPGs, is it's so different. The experiences can be so different, just even shuffling around DMs in the same group.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. Now, getting back to player agency, this does sort of intersect with railroading.
Yeah,
now,
they kind of go hand in hand at a certain point, right?
For those that didn't listen, to our previous episode, I believe Session 0 was part of the railroading one. No, maybe the first one. I don't know. We've touched on it a few times.
Railroading in a little bit because it's important especially as a new GM to understand. And I mean, I fell into this pitfall as well as a new GM when I was, which is you don't get to control the player's choices. You get to control the problems. You set the obstacles. The players come up with the solutions. That's kind of the definition of a sandbox game, right? Like that is how a sandbox game works, is I'll give you the toys in the sandbox and you determine how to use them to your best benefit.
Now, sandbox in this regard, meaning tool-wise, not story-wise.
Yeah.
Because a sandbox game is very different from what we're trying to describe.
And this might be a good opportunity to jump into it because in my opinion, when we talk about sandbox games, people immediately think of like Grand Theft Auto, or they immediately think of like, oh, the DM's just going to show up. We're going to do something random, and then the DM's going to just roll with it. And some DMs can do that, right? But for myself, the way that I have to work, I have to prepare things a little bit more than that. And so I look at these types of games in two lanes. You have a sandbox game, which is the one that I had mentioned to you, where there isn't any right solutions to the problems. There's just problems presented, and then the players can use whatever they've got in their disposal, in their bags, in their knowledge, in their skills, whatever they've got in order to accomplish a goal, right? We're going to tell you what to do, not how you do it. That's the GM's role here. Yeah. In my opinion, that's what the sandbox game is. There is an open world game, and sometimes they'll refer to this. You'll hear it called a West Marches game as well. But an open world game is where the players tell the DM what they want to do, and then the DM prepares as they go. And it's wide open. You're plopped in a town. What do? We're going to go west. Okay, we're going to go west. This is what you find when you go west. Okay, we're going to go into that castle. The DM might not have any of this stuff prepared at all, and they're either preparing it on the go, or they're saying, okay, I'm going to need a week. I'll get my stuff together, and then we'll run the castle. And then the game's halted until that point in time.
These types of open world games are very hard.
Those are difficult games to run. You need the right table for that. And I know we use that often in our podcast about having the right table. That one, you really need the right table because people will take advantage of that really easily if you're somebody trying to just do this on the fly. You do have to, as a GM, you have to prepare slightly what you're going to run. If you're going to run a adventure or a module or whatever it is that you're going to run, you have to go through that book. You have to understand the quirks and the workings of it.
You got to know what you're playing and what you're running. Because
you can't think the same way that the players do. Because you're not the players. Well,
you can, but God, I wouldn't want to because you would get stuck in an endless loop of doing this and that and this and that and this and that.
That's what I mean. You can only think as you would as a player. But when you get that knowledge out of that book, a light switch goes on and you can never turn it back off again. So you can't think the same way as somebody who approaches this problem completely fresh with the information they've collected up till now. You know, they don't. So they're going to make the inferences and the assumptions in order to solve the problems with what they've got.
It's the old knowing the answer to the riddle thing, right?
That's right.
The riddle's very simple once you know the answer. But if you come in blind and you don't know the answer, that riddle can be very hard.
Difficult. Absolutely.
Yeah. DG, in what way can player agency be broken?
Ooh, in what ways can't it be broken? So I mean, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I mean, the number one thing that comes to mind, in my opinion, is excessive storytelling, right? So the DM is basically playing a solo game with an audience. Like if you are the type that wants to write out the 6-page The players are going to go into a castle. They're going to walk down a corridor. In the corridor is 8 windows. And the 6th window is a this. And the players are going to look at this and they're going to spin this in the right direction. And the door's going to open. And if you're going to write all that out, just write the book.
Yeah. Make the adventure.
Just
publish it.
Write the book yourself.
Yep.
And you'll get the same level of satisfaction because that's essentially what you're doing. When you do this, you cut your players out of the equation. The correct answer to this is you stand in a corridor with windows lining the hall. What do?
There's a door at the other end.
Yeah. Like that's all the GM has to do. You can give the descriptors, but I like to hold that back unless the players ask. If they don't ask, I don't tell. It's that simple. Is the room dark? It's dim light for 10 feet in front of you, but you can't see the other end of the hallway. Oh, now I've got another piece of information. What's on the windows? Well, you look to the window on the left or the right? The left. The window on the left doesn't have anything on it. Okay, the right. The one on the right has a picture of a sun on it.
Bada
right?
bing, bada boom.
And you work your way through from there, right? This is important, and the reason why you're doing this is, to go back where we were talking about before, you're trying to prevent railroading. We are not forcing a certain scenario to happen for the DM's purpose. That is the definition of railroading. Railroading is essentially the concept of you can only walk down the hallway.
Which is the GM saying, there's a hallway and you are walking down it.
That's right. I made the decision for you. You're currently walking through it. Even if you as a player going like, wait a second, I don't want to walk down this hallway. Too bad you're doing it. Yep. And you're doing it because I know what's at the end of that hallway and I need you to trigger that trap that's at the end in order for me to get to the next part.
I need you to get through that door now so that the big bad on the other side can wallop you one. Yep.
Now, some GMs like to get smart and go, I know how I can get to my scenario. I'm going to give them the option to turn around and leave. But when they turn around and leave, the hallway that was on the one side expands to the other and the door's on the other side too. And
dun, dun, dun.
Now what I've done is I've taken away the choice. The choice is irrelevant. Whether you walk forward or backwards, it's the same door. Yep. This is essentially called soft railroading. When you can do this or that, but they both land at the exact same spot.
I'll give the players, 3 or 4 routes to take. Mm-hmm. And they'll go in vastly different places and they'll lead to different things. But if there is a story plot point that I need to get to them, it will be at the end of all of those.
Absolutely.
Just depending on the scenery will change for that plot point. But it will always be at the end of those routes.
And in my opinion, that is not railroading. You have to have the story plot points in order to move the story along. But you're allowing the players to make the choice of whatever it is that they want. No matter what, they're going to get where they need to get to. But
it is never the same door or tower at the end of every route.
It's important that they don't see things the way that you see them.
Exactly.
So if there's 2 doors and they both lead into the same corridor, it shouldn't feel like their choice didn't matter. They should always be wondering, oh man, I wonder what would have happened if we went down the left door. And if they choose to back up, I know we were both going to say the same thing. If they choose to back up and go take the left door, it better lead somewhere else.
It had better be a different door.
And
if it leads to the same corridor, that is, I dare say, bad dungeon design.
It is, yeah. Some other ways that you can break agency, narrating the player's characters with and an asterisk on this one without them telling you to. Sometimes there's times when they're like, hey, I am unfamiliar with this one thing. Can you tell me what my player would be thinking in this moment?
Yes. And this typically comes in the form of like knowledge checks of some sort of the area or certain things. Like I know our games, we ask about, would my player character know about this enemy, or if they're familiar with tracks like these and stuff like that. And then we'd roll
a skill check of some kind.
Skill check it out, and the GM usually tells us.
That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. What I mean by this is essentially saying, your player knows this thing. This is what your player would be saying right now. Oh, okay. Well, hang on a second. I don't agree with that, and it's my player.
The other way that we can break it is running the player's character.
That's right.
For them.
Yeah.
And this includes explaining, how they feel about certain things and, what they do or think. And that definitely becomes an NPC instead of a player character.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we've said that the players have spent a lot of time building these characters. They have fleshed them out. They know what they think and feel at all times.
They've envisioned this character the way that they've envisioned it, so this has become an extension of themselves.
More so than the DM knows this character.
Correct. Absolutely.
For sure.
There's one other way that I could think of that can break player agency, and GMs, you're off the hook here, kind of. And that would be overbearing players. If you've ever been at a table where the player beside you goes, "Hey, I see that you're fighting a troll. Make sure you hit it with fire." No.
No, well,
you're metagaming.
First of all, we got a number of things wrong here. Unless you've come up against trolls and your character specifically knows that trolls are weak against fire or acid,
mm-hmm.
you can't be doing that.
Yeah,
that's a
there's
no-no.
a lot there.
You have your own character to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Do not worry about the other characters and how they're going to act.
Yeah.
You can say, "Hey, my character knows that they're weak against fire. Make sure you fling fire at them."
Completely different.
Turn.
Completely different.
Yes.
If you're on your turn shouting to the party, "Hey, you have to hit these things with fire because I know this from my background as a troll hunter," or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's different.
That is completely different.
But
that is okay.
The player that sits beside you and tells you, "Hey, if you go forward and turn to the left, you can do this and then this and then this." And then you're essentially playing my character for me.
Yeah.
So it's not just GMs. Players do this too.
When that paladin rolls that crit and everybody at the table chanting "smite, smite, smite." I mean,
different story again.
That's
different story again. I would always encourage that type of table atmosphere. This is definitely
it's
the
completely
times
different.
You can always pick the person out, right? Because they can't help but offer forward their advice.
Yes.
This is what you should do. Like, if that was me, this is what I would do. And it's like, thanks.
Yeah. You should do this because
we got to
do
a podcast on, there's a list of like the different types of players.
Oh, the players.
We got to do one on that. That's for a future episode, because I think there's something to say about that type of player at your table. The GM, I said the GMs are mostly off the hook, but they're not completely off the hook. The GM's got to nip that in the bud. The GM has to pull that player aside and say, "Listen, you play your character. You don't play John's character. You leave John's character alone. If you have suggestions for John, you can talk with John about it. But if John says, no, I'm good, that's the end of it. And I don't want to hear it anymore."
Or do what I do with the kids and call them all together and say, "Hey, this is a group thing. It's been happening. Everybody, we're not naming names, but your characters are your characters. Don't play anybody else's characters."
You can also do the petty thing and give them a -5 on every roll until they learn their lesson.
Those are for the extra stubborn ones. Yeah.
I think we should get into why, like, so so that's the definitions, player agency, and how it's broken. Why are we even talking about this though, Finn? Right? Like, why does this actually matter at the end of the day?
Because
I thought you said my fun is valid no matter how I want to have it.
Well, no, it's not.
Turns out that was a lie.
It is, but it's not. So your fun is valid as long as it is not interfering with anybody else's fun at the table.
That's the rest of it, isn't it?
That is. Yeah. Because, hey, we're all playing.
Correct.
And I stress this, a game.
Yes.
We are playing a game.
That's right.
Now, sometimes real life stuff comes into it and it affects some things, but for the most part, we play these games to escape our miserable realities and go into a less miserable
At the end of the
fantasy.
day, we all want to roll the clickety-clack math dice and have a fun time.
And get the good feelings from that. Yeah.
That's right.
No, the core mechanic of a TTRPG is the player being able to shape the story and how that story progresses through the GM's plot.
Mm-hmm.
And like the GM should not have, plot 1 part B,
Yep.
section C. They have to walk through door
Correct.
B.
Yeah.
Right. We're talking like they got to go from city to city.
I was feeling a little bit attacked because that's literally how I lay my adventures out is like 1A, 1A1, 1A2, 1A3. But 1 is the chapter that we're on. A is the goal that we're at. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 are the different steps the players are taking to get there. So it's not like you must get to A to B to C to D. Specifically making the decisions for you. It's you must get to A to B to C to D for the story to have a conclusion. At any given time, if you choose, we're done. I don't care about that dragon in that town. Let that dragon take that town out. We're going somewhere else. Okay, no problem.
Yes, I'm going to need a month's worth of work.
I'm going to have to prepare the new stuff that you want.
But
and
we can definitely maybe try that.
Since the dragon didn't get taken out, it's that town today. It's another town tomorrow. But I mean, that's the idea. If the players want to change it off, sure, let's change it.
Without player agency, there's no role playing going on. You're sitting there and you're listening to the story and interacting only negligibly.
Whenever the DM tells you can.
Yeah. And that's not to say that some tables do prefer this way of playing because some tables are strictly,
see previous episode about
the big thing.
Session 0. Session 0 will tell you what type of table you're in. If it's a wrong fit, find a new table.
Now, this also empowers creativity and open thinking with the players. When the players know that their choices matter, their juices start just going hard.
That's right.
And they start to pick out and trying to hum and haw and pick apart their obstacle and come up with really cool and unique ways of solving this problem in front of them. Things, like you said, that the GM would never think of doing. And it is on the GM to sort of allow that to a point. I mean, you're not going to see the big boulder in front of you and think, I'm going to think real hard and that boulder's going to disappear.
That's right. Well, yeah. You're going to have to come up with some kind of game plan here.
Yeah.
And that's an opportunity to ask the GM too if you're lost or confused, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, really, this type of gameplay is what drives that storytelling component we've been talking about in all the previous episodes, right? Some of the best moments in TTRPGs are the ones that just weren't even planned at all. Ask anybody about their favorite moments at a table, and they'll tell you this one time, John's character did this one thing, and it was such a crazy moment because this happened, this happened, and this happened. And as you're listening to it, none of that was scripted. It was just a matter of like the right place, the right time, things clash together. And those wild and unexpected things is what created the great story that the players got to play through. So it's important that we keep this balance in check, because if we don't, those moments won't happen. If the DM is the one who's dictating the game, you'll never get those unforgettable, wild and unexpected moments. That's not going to happen. And as the GM, you're a player too. You need to also have fun. It's not fun for you just to write the story and read it to your players.
There's a thing for that, and that is called emergent stories. There's a thing for that, and that thing is called emergent storytelling. Yes. And it is so cool when it actually happens.
We touched on that in the microlights that we did.
Yes, and Traveler also.
And Traveler also does it too. Some of the other games that we do, they kind of all do the same concept.
They do,
but this is where those tables and everything are going to come into play for you. Is you're going to be able to use those to your advantage now in order to deliver the best possible story that has this random element to it, and your players also leading into it. Well, what do I see down that hallway? Well, rolls the dice. There is a chimera standing at the end of the hallway.
Emergent storytelling is based off of the players to the GM.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the players doing things and the GM rolling with it and being like, heck yeah, we are doing that now. Let's do that for a hot second. The dragon can wait for 5 minutes while we do this cool little thing over here.
Yep.
Yeah, let's do that.
We give them the what,
and
they
go.
give us the how. That's how this typically works, right?
Exactly.
So I mean, obviously we've been talking about the reasons why you don't want to do this, but if it was to take place at your table, and anybody who's experienced player agency loss and severe railroading at their tables, they're going to tell you that the consequences here are actually pretty dire. Your players are going to become very disengaged when their choices don't matter, probably leave, because what's the point of being here? You don't need me here. You're just going to read your story.
Exactly. They're going to be filled with frustration and resentment because nothing kills momentum like a GM or another player saying, hey, this is what your player's doing or what your character's doing, and this is how they feel. So deal with it.
Exactly. We spoke about the railroading, but that it basically ends up being suffocated out because your choices don't matter. Nothing actually makes a difference. You're going to get through to the end of the story because that's what the DM wants you to do.
Yeah. And you also lose the immersion into the game where your players don't feel like they're part of the world anymore.
Yeah.
So they don't feel like their input matters. So they're like, well, I mean,
what's the point?
We'll just do our thing and eventually we'll get to the right spot because that goes hand in hand with the railroading part.
And that's what leads into players screwing around at your table.
Yeah,
they'll do goofy things to kind of get a laugh at people. They'll pull out their phones. They'll do this is what ends up happening because you've essentially lost the players. They've kind of stepped away from the game and they've gone into whatever else, right?
This is what breaks tables up.
Absolutely.
Which is unfortunate. It is a table killer.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
But the overarching problem is that this is going to create conflict at your table, right? So you're going to have as a GM, you're either going to have to step in and deal with player-on-player conflict, or the players are going to have to conflict with the GM in this case, right? So, it's important to identify that you need to keep a grip on this stuff, and you cannot let it get out of hand.
DG, we've been, covered what it is, why it matters, what happens when it breaks down, all that stuff. How do we actually go about protecting it? How do we save it?
What, or phrased another way, listen, podcast guys, give me some real usable advice.
yeah. You're saying all the things,
a lot
not
of things,
to do
but you're not actually
what
telling
it is.
me
But we're not actually giving any tips or tricks here. So let's get to we're now like a half hour in. Come on,
exactly.
let's get doing something.
So
here.
I mean, the thing is, one of the most important things that you can do in this case is that describing the outcome, not the action, is key here as a GM, right? You're not going to say you cower in fear. What you're going to say is something along the lines of, this is a very terrifying moment. Your hands are shaking. Your heart is pounding. What do? The best GM things in these moments typically end in a question, right? It's not you cower in fear. What do you do? Well, I guess I cower in fear, right? Like, you need to create a scenario that the players can take the information being provided and then provide a suitable response to that situation that you're providing them.
Yes. And the other thing that you do as the GM is to present consequences, not ultimatums.
Yeah.
So you say, hey, this might happen, not you have this or this.
Right. Yeah. Can I attempt to jump onto the table to shoot this arrow a little bit higher? Yes, you could.
Yes.
But
you need to make a skill check to get up on that table.
And if you fail, the table's going to slip and you're going to fall.
That's right. No, you cannot do that.
Or yes, you get onto the table, right? Like it goes both ways, right? Like, railroading doesn't necessarily always mean that it's a bad thing.
It's not always negative railroading.
It could be positive
railroading is a thing.
And it's just as bad, right? Like, if a player asks to do something crazy and you always say, yeah, you can do that, and here's a bonus for you being able to do that, you're going to get real unwieldy things happening within your game, and you're not going to know how to reel it back in when you need to. So it's important to identify that, and again, consequences don't mean bad. It's important to identify that there is equal reactions to the actions that you're performing here.
This is where the rule of cool has a really slippery slope.
It really does. It really does.
It does. Because you want the player to do that cool thing, like jump up on the table and do a flip up there in midair, shoot the
flourish.
Chandelier down, and
one fell swoop. I'm gonna pull an arrow from my quiver, knock it to my bow, and loose it in one fluid motion.
That would be visually really cool.
Yep.
Yes. So let's do it, but we'll have to do even just roll a d20 high low.
See, the thing the way that I play at my tables, and I'm pretty I know you do the same thing too. If we're just talking for theatrics, yes. If there's no bearing on the game whatsoever, I just want this.
There is no mechanical things in there.
I want this to look cool. I want to describe it to the table so that everybody can envision what it is that I see in my head. I'm not going to make you roll for that. Yep, that's what you do. Pretty cool. If you're saying, I want to jump onto the table to get a height advantage and be able to attack with advantage, yes, but that's what you get. You get a yes, but you're going to also receive, if you fail this check, something's going to happen.
Yeah. It's got to be something. Yeah. Because now you are changing the mechanics of the game, not just the flavor.
Yeah, it's not just a scene in a movie anymore. Now it's like literally the lead role.
Yeah. So a GM should get into the habit of asking players questions instead of just telling them what happens. Yeah. Again, with the hallway, right? You have a hallway in front of you with some windows. It's dimly lit. What would you like to do?
Yeah.
Not, there's a hallway with 6 windows. There's 17 candles on banisters and a door at the other end. Oh, and by the way, you see a trap at the other end of the hall.
Or on the 14th candle, it has this symbol on it and it tells you this.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll just take that information and we'll go with it. Right?
Yeah.
It's important that you leave those decisions. If the players miss the 14th candle, well, they missed the 14th candle. It might have been important. And if they get to the point where they need that 14th candle and they don't have it, what's the consequence for that? Because maybe they can't open a door anymore, and now they got to backtrack and try and find it. That's not exactly the best mechanics that you could have put into your game, because it seems a little tedious. But you know what? Maybe they need to look closer at those candles that are in that hallway. Maybe one of them's blue and the rest of them are white. That one's a pretty obvious one that I should probably take a look at it.
As a GM, you are behind a screen. Mm-hmm. Now, you have the ability to roll dice without the players knowing what the result is and what that dice roll is actually for. So this is where private rolls come into play. Mm-hmm. You can roll you can roll 3 or 4 perception checks as they walk past that 14th candle.
Yep.
And if all of them fail, well, they don't notice that candle. But if one of them does pass, you can be like, hey, as you're walking by, something is odd about that.
Catches your eye about the blue
candle. Yeah.
And you could literally lead them to it. You don't have to say you grab that candle. You can simply say, just like you did, as you're walking by, something catches your eye about the blue candle.
Yeah.
And leave it at that. They can be like, oh yeah, cool candle, and keep walking.
Watch that party put on the hard brakes and inspect that candle for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Before they find out what it is.
Exactly. Use that sparingly, because that can also backfire really bad. We kind of mentioned it before, but I mean, the concept here is that we're not writing scripts out, right? You can have your monologues prepared. You can have your NPCs prepared and what the NPCs would say and different scenarios and all of these different things, but it should never be when the players get to the hallway, the person comes through the door and tells them this, and then the players respond with this, and then the guy says, follow me, and the players follow the guy, right? Like, that shouldn't exist.
No, it should.
If you ever find yourself writing in parts for the players, you're doing it wrong.
Again, there's a table for that.
Yeah, but
it's
not most
typical.
tables.
No. GM and the players are creating a story together. We are playing a game together. It's never GM versus players. Now, sometimes it is, but not typically.
Right,
no.
right.
It is a group storytelling game, and that's what TTRPGs are. They're group storytelling games.
Yeah. So, I mean, with all of that being said, we've kind of hinted at it a little bit here, but there are times when it is actually okay to kind of not take agency away, but really get fuzzy with that line a little bit, because the things that I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, in my opinion, there's two lines here. There is the player agency and then limiting player choices. And player choices and player agency are not the same thing. These are different concepts.
They are very different pieces. Yes. Player agency is the player being able to, again, decide things for their character.
Mm-hmm.
Limiting their choices is just saying, hey, you've got 3 choices to go.
I've prepared 3 things for tonight.
If you guys would like to do something else, we're going to have to take a little break, or it's not going to end up very well, and I won't be presenting you a very good story for that 4th option.
Yep. I don't have enough for option 4 tonight, but if that's what you guys want to do, we can absolutely do that. We'll put this away for now. I'll come back in a week and we'll get that going then.
Yeah. We'll grab Merkborg down and we'll run through a mini dungeon real quick.
And sometimes that is how the session's going to end for the night. That might be how it is. But 9 times out of 10, your players going to be like, nah, we want to go with option 1. We were just kind of picking on you a little bit just to see what you'd say.
We're just joshing you,
right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you know, you have the story hooks in D&D or whatever game it is that you're playing. And that's what they're there for. So if the players don't take the hook, they might want something else. Okay. You might be able to run this on the fly, and if you can, way to go. That's fantastic. I'm not a DM that can run that way. I have to have a little bit prepared in order to be able to do my job correctly.
This is all completely table dependent. Some tables are completely fine with being told where to go and how to get there, and they only care about rolling the dice and swinging the axe and getting the killing blow.
Yeah.
If that's your table, choo along, buddy.
Away you go. There's a table for everybody out there. That's for sure.
There's a table for everybody. Yes.
Yeah.
This is just for the people that aren't like that.
Yeah.
They want to role play their character. They want to ham it up a little bit with their character.
I would say the vast majority of tables are just an average Joe, run of the mill. They play every Sunday. They do their thing.
they have their 9 to 5 job Monday to Friday, and they play Saturday nights or Sundays.
Kick back with the math rocks.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah.
That's about.
I mean, those are kind of the finer points, if you will, right? I mean, you might look at this and be like, yeah, that was obvious, but I find that it's not just beginner GMs that fall into the traps. Beginner GMs, you're more likely going to look at a module and feel the need to run it verbatim, word for word. And the veteran GMs are going to look at that module and be like, the stuff that's on the page doesn't really matter. These are guidelines. These aren't the rules. And that is the difference of running games more, like getting more experience as a GM, is deciding which are the ones that are the line in the sand, we cannot cross these, and the ones that are a little bit more wishy-washy. And that's just going to come with time and practice, as far as I'm concerned.
The best and worst piece of advice I got when I started GMing was always say yes.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yes, asterisks.
Yeah, I like yes, but.
Always say yes, but.
Yeah.
That is, like, if you want to use acrobatics to climb a rope, yes, but.
Yeah.
You have to tell me how you're actually going to use your acrobatics and not your athletics to climb that rope. you can roll acrobatics, but again, you have to tell me you can't just cartwheel up a rope. That doesn't happen.
You can try
if you want to do like that rope dancing crap where they hang themselves and twirl around on the rope and work your way up the rope. Sure, we can
try something out there.
I can work with that. The DC is going to be a little different than the guy pulling himself hand over hand.
Absolutely. But maybe you have a 14 in acrobatics, and you were born into a circus, and that's your background, and all of this. So I mean, there is an option for everything. I think the overarching thing that we're trying to say here is make sure that you remember that your table needs to be balanced in order for the game to work properly. The GM is also a player, just from a different perspective. And once everybody's on the same page, all of a sudden things start to flow really easily. I would recommend to all new DMs that you do not script out your adventures. Do not put anything about when player A reaches this point, this happens. And I'm telling you this because as a GM who has once upon a time wrote, when player A reaches this point, this happens. And then player A doesn't reach that point, therefore that doesn't happen. And all the story points that were attached to that one thing don't happen. You as a GM are going to hear that little goblin voice in your head going, well, what if we just made them do it? What if we just forced them over there, and then all the work that we put into this would take effect? And that's the wrong way to play this game, because I've taken the fun away from the player and put it on myself.
Even veteran GMs can fall into stealing player agency.
Absolutely. It happens really fast sometimes.
Yeah, it does.
You get in the heat of the moment and you just kind of away you go.
Yeah. And I mean, all that has to happen is, we are all consenting adults. Mm-hmm. We come together to play these games. We can have adult conversations.
That's right.
Now, if you are not an adult and listening to this, you're considered an adult if you're playing one of these games.
If you're sitting at the table, you have a voice, right? Adult, non-adult, whatever it is, you have a voice because you're playing a role in this role-playing game. It's important that you identify that if you're unhappy with a certain thing, that you make that clear to the table. It doesn't mean that you should be a problem player, but it does mean that if you're not having fun, you should advise the table you're not having fun, and the table should, I'm going to asterisk this, work with you in order to make it fun. If the table does not work with you to make it fun, now it's time to find a new table.
Pack your things up. Find a new table. Because there's lots of tables.
There's virtual tables out there. There's in-person tables out there. You got options.
Yeah. What we're saying is, go have fun, but don't steal.
Yeah, don't take it from somebody else. Yeah. It's that simple. I got nothing else to add on this topic, Finn. Anything else from your side?
The only thing is, I can't stress this enough. Some players take weeks to build characters for their games, and they pore over every little piece of information about that character. So they know that character way better than anybody else at this table, including the GM.
That's right.
That player knows that character. They spent, and like rolling stats and getting abilities and powers, that is a very small fraction of
those are the mechanical components of the character.
Yeah. That's very like minuscule compared to trying to find the right background, the backstory to fit
what color the character's hair is, if they even have
their flaws and their ideals, what they strive to be and what they fight for.
That's right.
You know, these kinds of things, they can't just be put down in paper in 4 words and you read it and go, oh, okay, well, that's what this no, that's not how it works, because there's a whole bunch of feelings that go into that. So that becomes that character. And that's why player agency is so important, because after spending weeks of building a character and you sit in your first game with that character and the GM tells you how that character feels, well, no, that's not exactly how I envisioned this character being.
Actually.
So, yeah. Yeah, because all of a sudden they become an NPC, and it's
not fun.
Not fun.
You're not there to listen to someone else play the game.
Yeah. Now, I will say, most of the time, asterisks, their character creation is done in private because in my experience, it's a very intimate thing for me to build my character privately.
Yeah.
I much rather prefer it privately. Even when we do online group building, my character building, I'm very quiet. I'm busy either figuring out what their flaws and stuff are, or I just want to introduce a cool character that nobody has seen yet.
And I don't mean this to be offensive, but I don't want other people's opinions on my characters. I want to build it for me.
That's right. I've had this idea tucked away in my mind for the past 7 years. I want to get this sucker on paper the way I feel like it. Now, there are other games, and I'm looking at you, Traveler, where this is all group built.
A character
and that
process
is also fun.
Yeah, the character creation process in Traveler is the game itself, right? So I mean,
it is a lot of the game. Yeah, it's a lot. There's of fun. But
yeah,
that's what I mean. It is. And
those are different experiences.
It's a completely different thing. Yeah. But that's all I wanted to get out.
So yeah, that's it. I think with that being said, we should turn our attention to the post-pod. Post-pod.
Yeah.
Post-pod. I mean,
that's something.
Yeah, it serves as a break. Finny, this is your post-pod question, so I'm just gonna let you take care of it this time.
Okay. Do you prefer minis, standees, tokens to theater of the mind, and why?
Yeah. So I'll tell you right now. I do like theater of the mind. I do like it. I really, really like minis. I have been in love with miniatures since I started this hobby. Right. And my love for the hobby predates 3D printers. So I don't even know what I would do if I had a 3D printer, like all the shelves I would need for all the miniatures that I would be printing.
Oh God, I can just imagine.
But I mean, I love miniatures. I love the idea that I can put a little plastic model figurine on a piece of paper and have everybody around the table look at that and understand that that is a dwarf fighting a giant. Just by looking at the ferocity of those models themselves. I especially like painted models, because it just gives it that much more life, right? Would I only play with miniatures? No. If you've got standees or tokens or we're doing Theater of the Mind, yeah, I'm in. I love the game, so that is what it is. But if I have to choose between these, I'm going miniatures all day long. How about you?
Interesting. I am going theater of the mind.
I knew that was going to be your answer. I did.
I prefer theater of the mind. I like being able to describe the things, and it becomes so much more fluid in everybody's mind. Yeah. Rather than seeing painted models look beautiful. I do like minis and standees and tokens. Of course. They do very well.
You love the game. If somebody said we're playing the game and here's your miniature, you're going to grab that miniature.
I'm not walking away from that. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. If I had a choice, it's always going to be theater of the mind because everybody's mind sees the giant fighting the dwarf completely different.
Absolutely.
And in some, because the descriptor for a dwarf fighting a giant is there's a dwarf fighting a colossal giant. Well, how big is colossal compared to the dwarf?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's everybody's colossal's completely different.
You're going to see a different picture in mind.
In everybody's mind, everybody's going to go, "Wow, that is crazy."
Yeah, this is crazy. I'm not somebody who has a very good imagination, so that's a problem for me. That has always been the issue with Theater of the Mind because I have a tendency to ask questions. How far away am I from the giant? You're about 30 feet. Okay, how far can I move? Like all of the mechanics, the game's not intended if we're talking about 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, it's not intended to be played theater of the mind anymore. Once upon a time it was.
No, not anymore.
But now they've introduced miniature combat and all of those kinds of things. So I've kind of just pre-programmed into that. You have to cut away a lot of the mechanics in order to make theater of the mind work. Now, with that being said,
you do.
If the GMs put in the effort and we're doing it correctly, 100%. That is a fun play. But I get distracted really easily, and I do need something pretty to look at. So.
I will say that theater of the mind does not work for, like, not very well, I should say, for D&D and Pathfinder and those kinds of games.
If it's combat heavy like that.
Or where it's really crunchy.
Yeah,
like
the
right?
rules are crunchy.
Yeah, they're very specific things that you can do at specific distances. That's very hard to switch over to theater of the mind. That's why minis and grid paper work really well. But
something like Merkborg, no problem.
Yeah, I love me theater of the mind Merkborg
all day long.
Yeah. Okay,
that's it.
That's all.
Episode 20. Thank you everybody so much for choosing this episode and downloading and listening to it. We do want to thank each and every one of you for doing that. If you would like to help us out, if you're interested in doing that, we would appreciate simply just liking the podcast or sharing it with your friends or letting other people know that the podcast is here, telling you about different tabletop RPGs every 2 weeks, or episodes like this every 5th episode. We're throwing you one of these behind the screens. We have a ongoing Dungeons and Dragons game that we stream every single Sunday night. You can find that on twitch.tv/DGOnline. You can also find that on youtube.com/@DadGamingOnline, the same place that this podcast is being hosted, alongside Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
We also have our email that you can reach out at us, mastersofpenandpaper@gmail.com. Send us an email. Let us know what your thoughts on this episode or any episode are, and just
send us a post-pod question.
Whatever you want.
We'll ask your question and answer it on the air.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever you want. Just say hi. Even
let us know.
Drop us a line. We also have a Discord. There'll be a link to that in the description below. Very poppin' place lately. Yep. There's a lot going on. Lots of video game talk, lots of board game talk,
Discord.
Lots of all
community
sorts of stuff.
Is fantastic.
Yeah, community is great. That's about all we got.
That's it. That's all. Episode 21's the next one. Make sure to tune in for that. And until then, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, people. See ya.